We now move on to Bart Beaty from the Faculty of Communication and Culture at the U of C. Bart.
Thank you. I want to just pick up in my comments on something that Toby just touched on in passing, which is this notion of talented amateurism. I want to focus specifically on what these new technologies and sharing communities and so on might mean for the future direction of our culture and the form of art. We haven't done a lot of name dropping of other academics and scholars for you tonight, but I will say that in 1936, a scholar named Walter Benjamin wrote a much talked about essay called The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, in which he argued that the ability to replicate individual works of art, whether that's a film or images of paintings and books and so on, was diminishing what he called the erratic function of art, that sense that you get when you're in the presence of a great painting like the Mona Lisa, that this is, something really impressive. It was touched by the hand of Da Vinci himself, and that mechanical reproduction would take that away. We're now looking in an age of YouTube, and Sarah gave us the figures, 65,000 films being uploaded to YouTube every day. And I think we should say that again and again, 65,000 films a day. That we're in an era of massive reproduction, no longer simply mechanical, but digital media have given us massive reproduction. And so the question is, what kind of impact is that going to have on the society that we live in and on the culture that we leave behind us? What it's meant, of course, is that culture and the arts are no longer simply the domain of an elite. It's now open to all kinds of people. We could divide the creators now of culture between the famous and not famous, the professional, the amateur, the good and the bad, the famous and not yet discovered. Those axes might shed some light, but I want to suggest that there's another way of conceptualizing the type of culture that we now find ourselves in. And for that we need two axes. We need an X and a Y axis. And I think we could term these generally the axis of popularity and the axis of respect. We can agree, I think, that there are certain artists in any medium that are particularly well known. If you think of the field of music, you would say that the best known musicians on the planet today are Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, Madonna, and so on. The best known filmmakers have names like Spielberg. The best known writers have names like J.K. Rowling. These are artists that are able to reach millions and millions of people. At the low end of the popularity axis, we would have some kid in a basement in Altadore right now who's sitting there, trying to figure out the difference between an F and a G chord on his guitar. Not yet famous, may never become famous, certainly has very little in common with Madonna. But both are available on YouTube if they so choose to be. Both can make that material, put that material out there. The other axis that we might want to intersect that with would be the axis of consecration. That is, there are certain works that we tend to think are better than others. And I'm not saying that there's a one-to-one relationship between those works that are the best and those works that are the most consecrated, but there tends to be some sort of connection. And we tend to see that certain writers, for example, if we look at the Giller nominations that were announced this week, tend to crop up again and again, so that we get Michael Ondaatje nominated for the Giller Prize again, that we get M.G. Sanji nominated for the Giller Prize, and possibly winning it for a third time. We have certain artists that carry a lot of respect in our society, and we have certain artists that carry very little respect. We have artists like Karen Kane, who, if she came into this room, would be greeted with a certain kind of deference, and we have an artist like Bret the Hitman Hart, who, as a professional wrestler, if he came into this room, would be met with a different sort of reaction and a different sort of respect, although they both do very similar things, if you think about it in terms of control of their body and the way that they're able to manipulate an audience through their performance. So on the one hand, we have an axis of popularity, and on the other hand, we have an axis of respect. And if we can envision the I really needed the graphics for this, but if we can envision the quadrants that would be made by the intersection of those two axes, we would find that we have four quadrants, one of which we could call respected popular culture, which would be serious works of popular culture. Ondaatje's writing, for example. We would have respected but unpopular culture. So those are works of poetry, for example, which may sell dozens of copies, works of avant-garde dance, avant-garde painting, modernist works that don't have the kind of popular audience but still command a great deal of respect. On the other hand, we might have trashy popular culture, that is not respected but very popular works. I think we can think of the Fox television network, we can think of television shows like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, and think these shows might command audiences in the tens of millions, but do not generate a lot of respect. And we also have kind of the neglected quadrant, which would be trashy but unpopular culture. Those things that are neither particularly good, nor particularly respected, nor particularly popular. And you ask myself, where do YouTube videos, where do blogs, where do MySpace pages fit into this category? And my suspicion is that they fit into that category of unpopular but trashy. Sarah pointed out hundreds of millions of downloads, hundreds of millions of videos watched on YouTube every day. We can say with great certainty that YouTube itself is a popular medium for entertainment and information sharing. But can we say that any of the individual videos are particularly popular? Some phenomena have generated millions, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million views. Some films, I put a film last summer, it's been viewed 7 times. And I know that twice were by my parents and twice were by my in-laws. But
More tonight, more tonight.
I'll give you the URL if you want it afterwards. We can see that individual works on YouTube or on blogs may, in fact, be unpopular. What we're seeing in YouTube and MySpace and blogs is a fracturing of the media audience. Once upon a time in a city like Calgary, in 1954, there was one television station. If you wanted to watch television, if you owned a television, then you watched the CBC. In 1961, Calgary became the first city in this country to get an independent television station, which joined CTV. A year later, you had 2 television stations. Now, if you get the Shaw big package, you get hundreds of television stations. You're watching something in the basement, your wife is watching something upstairs, your kids are watching something in their rooms. Nobody's watching the same things as their coworkers. But on YouTube, with hundreds of millions of videos, it's very improbable that people are watching the same things. And so we're missing that opportunity for dialogue, but it means that despite the successes of Lonely Girl 15, that nothing is becoming particularly popular. And at the same time, nothing is becoming particularly respected. We still haven't seen Lonely Girl 15 raise its level to the best art that we're producing in this country. No one is seeing Lonely Girl 15 as akin to Divisadero by Ondaatje. I have the 1 minute now, too. I'll give you back because you'll need this for Michael. What is the impact on this? To wrap up, I can see 3 possible impacts. First off, it's changing our YouTube, Facebook, MySpace, these technologies are changing our understanding of what it means to be an artist or an intellectual. Gone is that kind of romantic notion of the artist garroted away in his ivory tower. The elitist associations that we bring to those terms are diminishing because of the technological change. Second is it's freeing other media to do other things. And most media advance when new media arrive. If we think of film, for example, film, despite some of the great films that were made in the 1930s and 40s, and you'll find no bigger supporter of Capra and Preston Sturges than I, film did not really come into its own as a unique art form until the arrival of television. And television took over those kinds of domestic melodramas and light comedies and allowed film to focus on other things and to achieve its fullest potential. We can ask the question, is YouTube going to take over the America's Funniest Home Videos aspect of television and allow television to focus on what it can do well, which is serialized drama of the quality of The Sopranos or The Wire, for example. And the third is, in this unpopular and unconsecrated area, a lot of things have been unpopular and unconsecrated in history. The novel was at one time. The cinema was at one time. If we think back to the 1890s and where the cinema was when the Lumiere brothers were making shorts in Paris, it was neither popular nor consecrated. But it was that murk and mire that allowed it to become the petri dish that gradually created new art. And I'm suggesting that maybe these new technologies will fulfill that role.